Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you call home. I hope you're enjoying the 2021 FME World Fair. Today, I'm here to talk to you about Amazon Workspaces and how it can enable flexibility and power for your FME desktop environment. My name is Scott Bateman. I'm a Principal Solutions Architect with Amazon Web Services, or AWS. Today, we want to talk about an FME journey that happens to be mine. I'll share a little bit of my experience using FME over the years, and then we'll talk about today's changing workforce and how the demands of the way people work is changing the tools we need to work, why AWS is important in enabling end user compute services to satisfy those needs, and we'll also give a demonstration of what Amazon Workspaces, part of our EUC services, provides and how it looks and feels to use. We'll briefly look at an architecture that you can implement in your own environment, and then I'll talk about a trial that AWS has where you can try out Amazon Workspaces for yourself. And finally, we'll wrap up with a Q&A session. So I began using FME Desktop in 2012. Started a big geospatial enterprise platform development project, and there was a lot of data loading we needed to do, in addition to transformation. So whether it was internal or public data sources, we were almost constantly loading data. FME Desktop was perfectly suited to this and fell in love with it right away. It was easy to use and very powerful. So much so that our entire team liked it, and very quickly we began to kind of grow out of FME Desktop. It was consuming a larger and larger part of the workday, running jobs. We would lock our laptop to our desk and leave it overnight in the office, or take it home with us and finish up transformation jobs from home, which wasn't always the fastest way to go about running FME Desktop. So we also looked at using FME Server, but given the characteristics of the legacy FME Server licensing model and just some of the constraints in our technical environment, it wasn't really a good fit. We also found that more and more of our geospatial data, and really any of the data we wanted to use going into FME Desktop or the targets where we were sending the data, tended to be in the cloud. And so I became very interested in how the cloud could enable different types of work patterns, which led me to join AWS as an employee in 2019. I've since been learning more about the services that AWS provides and figuring out ways to really simplify and streamline the experience of using both FME Desktop and Server in order to do things the quickest and cheapest way while still doing it in a secure manner. Not only has cloud changed the way that data centers work, but just our modern world has workforces that are demanding increased agility. So 20 to 35% of all US all US workers are not employees, but contractors. And that presents a challenge because contractors need access to your private company data, but they may not have a company device. Mergers and acquisitions is another use case where desktop as a service can be very compelling. It's typically spiky workloads where after a transaction, you have a lot of people doing work, some of which are contractors, some of which are partners, vendors, or even the company that you're merging with. And I work in the energy industry, and we've seen a lot of M&A, but 79% of all organizations expect an increase in M&A going forward. While agility is important, security is increasingly and even more important. At AWS, we say that security is job zero because it's even more important than our top priority. 70% of workers in a pre-COVID study reported that they work one or more days from home. I think we can all agree that over the past year, that number's probably gone up. Well, 1 in 4 data breaches happen because of a lost or stolen device. So if you're taking your company device out of the office, it can, be stolen from your vehicle or lost, damaged, misplaced, a number of disruptions. But from a security perspective, if that device is lost, your data could be at risk. And so that's one of the key things you need to think of when dealing with contractors, remote access for employees, or other patterns where data is mobile. Companies are moving to desktop as a service. Over half of all companies say that desktop as a service is part of their go-forward strategy. Why a lot of those customers are choosing AWS for their desktop as a service? To meet the needs of contractors, employees working remotely, mergers and acquisition activity, but also specialized applications like we see a lot of in survey and geospatial disciplines. And also customers are finding that they've tried to implement a VDI or virtual desktop interface environment on premises, but it's very expensive and difficult to maintain. Not only that, but you're generally provisioning for your peak capacity, which means you've overbought and you're underutilizing those resources a lot of the time. With AWS, we provide a great user experience, the agility and elasticity to be able to provision as many desktop environments as you need and provision whatever size you need. That could be a GPU-enabled capability of hardware running Windows, or as much memory as you need for your workload, or virtual CPUs. This can also be done in a very cost-effective way because you're only paying for what you use. With a consumption-based pricing model, if you have a large monthly transformation job, for example, you only pay for the hours that you're actually using it. So it's a different model in terms of pricing, and that allows you to keep your costs low. The global scale of the AWS infrastructure has regions all around the globe. So if your company is geographically dispersed, you can create workspace environments that are close to your data, close to your users, or both. As I mentioned, security is critically important at AWS, and we have a number of different mechanisms to secure your data and workloads in the cloud. But most importantly, when all of your desktop environment and data and processes are in the cloud, they're inherently secure compared to a company device with sensitive data on it that can tend to walk away or be stolen. So security is a big benefit for desktop as a service. And finally, reliability. Because of the redundant nature of everything in the AWS infrastructure, we have 7 times less downtime than our next closest cloud provider. Undifferentiated heavy lifting. That's something that we refer to as work that's difficult, complicated, and time-consuming, but doesn't offer a lot of value, or at least differentiated value. So for example, racking and stacking hardware. If you look on the left here, all of the blue areas represent what a AWS customer would be responsible for if they had VDI on premises. So they would be responsible for the hardware, for the operating systems, for the patching, for the management of the service, for keeping everything on the right version. And then finally, the administration of your desktop environment, meaning what versions of desktop do you want to support, what users have access to them, and what applications do you want to have running on them. If a company was to move their VDI onto AWS, you at least get away from the hardware responsibility. But what we're going to talk about today is the far right, where we have Amazon end user compute services. AWS handles the hardware as well as the whole managed service of the desktop itself. And then that allows you to focus on just what capabilities do I need, who should have access, and what applications do I want to make available. End user compute, or EUC services, are primarily thought of as 2 different offerings from AWS, Workspaces and AppStream. Workspaces is a desktop as a service. It's a, say Windows environment with everything you would be familiar with. It just happens to be in the cloud. AppStream, on the other hand, is streaming one particular application, which looks and feels like it's running on your machine, but it's actually running in the cloud and just streaming that application down to the user. All of these are fully managed, pay-as-you-go, consumption-based pricing that are reliable and secure. So next, I'd like to walk through a demonstration of Amazon Workspaces. So I'm going to be showing FME Desktop, as well as some GIS visualization tools and database query tools to show what it's like to work in a day-to-day kind of a mode in Amazon Workspaces. And here we are in the AWS Management Console. This is a browser-based interface that you can use to configure and access the hundreds of different resources that exist in AWS. While today we're going to focus on Workspaces, part of our end user compute service line, I also want to touch on RDS, which is Amazon Relational Database Service. And this allows you to store geospatial data in the cloud using a secure consumption-based model. So if we navigate to Workspaces, you can see on the navigation pane down the left that there are a number of different items that can be set up. You can configure your directory. The bundles are the different types of machines that you can create after installing your software. So once you've installed FME Desktop or other pieces of software that you'd like to be part of that image, you can then do that once and share that among all of your different users. The images that are available, such as a geospatial FME image created here, can be viewed in the images. And then Workspaces is once you've actually created one of those workspaces and assigned it to a user, it can be viewed here. You can see this one is currently available. It's what we'll be using for the demo. I have a Power with Windows 10 image that I've used, and the other technical information about that workspace can be seen here. You can see the bundle type of Power. And then I'll also note that it is running in auto stop mode, which means after an hour of not using it, it'll turn off and all costs associated with this workspace will be stopped. In order to access the workspace, you simply launch from your desktop machine. I'm running Windows 10 here, and you run a small program that's installed as a client to access your desktop as a service. The login that I'm going to use is going to be what's configured in the directories section within Workspaces. And I will go ahead and enter my username and password here. Upon signing in, you'll notice a familiar Windows desktop feel, because that is exactly what it is. It's Windows running behind the scenes of Workspaces. The desktop, you can see, has a very configurable and fluid interface. Today, I'll be looking at the FME Workbench and a visualization tool for looking at the spatial data that I've created or transformed. So I've got this simple job here that just takes some public data I found from the internet and takes it from an Amazon Simple Storage Service or S3 location, pulls it into this workspace, and then does some transformations and loads that up to the Amazon Aurora PostgreSQL with PostGIS database. I'll just run this job so it's running in the background while we take a look at what exactly is the data that we're dealing with here. Most of this data is, well, all of this data is publicly available. Here we have county boundaries for the state of Utah. I would like to also point out that you can bring in internet map services. So for things like world hillshade, street maps, satellite imagery, any other base maps you'd like to include can be pulled into Amazon Workspaces, whether it's in QGIS, which we're using here, ArcGIS Pro, ArcMap, or your favorite desktop visualization tool. Some of the larger data sets, such as roads, and this particular data set has about 750,000 features. What I'd like to show is that you still have a very seamless, fluid experience. All of this data is coming from the Aurora database that's in the cloud. It is not a local data source I'm using here, but you can see that the experience is very fluid, even with a large data set that has hundreds and hundreds of thousands of geospatial features. For this particular demonstration, I've loaded oil and gas wells and wind turbines that are in the area around Utah. So any desktop tool that you want to use, whether it be FME Desktop, GIS visualization tools, or things like SQL tools. I've got here HeidiSQL that can be used to access the Amazon Aurora PostgreSQL database. And for the purpose of this demonstration, what I'm going to do is just show how you can simply delete, reload, or do any other type of transformations you need on your geospatial data. So if we focus in over on this far right county within Utah, that's Uinta County. Has a bunch of wells there, but I can delete them all in my SQL tool. Then when I refresh my view and QGIS, you can see all of those wells are gone. No problem. I'll just go back to FME Desktop and I can run this transformer from here. This is just to reload the wells, and I'll run that. So you can see that the experience is very fluid. And one of the great things is that because a workspaces environment can have more CPU or memory than your laptop, desktop, or even a virtual machine that may be in your data center, you have the ultimate flexibility and security in order to run your geospatial transformations. So that load just took about 15 seconds to load 37,056 wells. And that was the entire data set. So I should see that my Uinta County wells are now replenished back here. So this gives you a little bit of an idea of what is it like to use Amazon Workspaces. Because you have internet access, as we mentioned, you can access web services, different map services from the internet, install software as needed per your IT security requirements, and do just about anything you can do from your desktop. But the great thing is, once you've got a job running, you can close it down and go about your business and not consume the resources on your machine while heavy geospatial transformations are running in FME. So putting it all together, here's what the solution architecture looks like. On the left in the red box, that represents your corporate on-premises network. That's where your GIS practitioners would use their desktops or laptops to connect to spatial databases or file servers that contain geospatial data. Over on the right is the AWS cloud, and you can see we have Amazon Workspaces with FME Desktop installed, which can be accessed either from the corporate network through a secure direct connection or through a VPN where remote workers or contractors could connect and use workspaces. Once in AWS, you can access relational database in a enterprise geodatabase in Aurora serverless, for example, using PostgreSQL, or you can access file-based GIS data in FSx for Windows as a file server. If you'd like to give Workspaces a try, the good news is that due to COVID work from home policies, we currently have a extension of the free tier for Amazon Workspaces. So you can get 50 users free through July 31st, and you can find all the details at the pricing page shown in the link below. The bundle type that we used today was a power bundle. And you can see it had 4 virtual CPUs and 16 gigs of memory. You can go all the way up to a Graphics Pro bundle that has 16 virtual CPUs, 122 gigabytes of memory, and dedicated memory for GPUs. And with that, we'll open it up for Q&A.